All right, we're going to jump into this next session after lunch, and we're going to be talking about the future of data activation. I really appreciated the sessions this morning. There were some good nuggets that teed this up really well. Cam mentioned in his session that it's not just about measuring the data. That doesn't make it worthwhile just because you're measuring things. And Beth also mentioned in her session that it's all about, like, how do you create one view now that we are selling and doing business in so many different channels? If you can't see a full view of what's happening, it really means nothing for your business. So with those two comments as our inspiration, we're going to jump in and we're going to start off with some introductions. So I will pass it over. We have Brendan, Chris, and Beck here today. They've got lots of great insights to share, and I'm going to tee it over to Brendan.
Yeah, excited to be here. So I'm Brendan, Gardner-Young. I'm the CTO of Thrive Causemetics. We started about 10 years ago, D2C beauty company, started in a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle. We're only D2C, and we've grown to be a big player in the space. I'm wearing my turquoise today. We wear turquoise Tuesdays. Everyone in the office wears our turquoise for it on Tuesdays, so I'm wearing my turquoise. But yeah, we're a color cosmetics company and a skincare company on Shopify.
I'm Chris Clark. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Grove Collaborative. We are a brand and retailer focused on sustainable natural home care and personal care products, and also increasingly wellness products. Largely, if you go to grove.com, that's us. Largely direct to consumer, but also we are a retailer. A significant percentage of our sales are products we design and manufacture ourselves, and a significant portion are third party as well. And our first party products are carried in retailers like Target, CVS, etc. Also about 10 years old. And I run analytics, product management, engineering, etc. I'm excited to talk about data.
I'm Beck Coggeshall. I'm the chief integrator of Aventus. We are a BPO located right here in Charleston, South Carolina. We offer a handful of services. Our bread and butter is customer support agents. We're completely full service. So we recruit, hire, train, and manage customer support agents that handle all of the customer service interactions for our clients. We also offer dedicated quality assurance experts and also help desk management implementation and optimization. And we also offer bookkeeping services. And looking forward to talking to you all some today.
So today we're going to dive into a few different areas of data activation. A lot of you might be thinking, what is data activation? What does it mean? And so we're going to talk through, what does it look like if you haven't started that journey yet? What does that look like for you and your business? Really excited. Chris and Brendan have some great examples from where to get started, because there's a plethora of data and it's just tough to know where to jump in. And then really excited, Beck's going to share quite a bit in terms of the voice of the customer and how to really enable you and your business based off of what you're the people who love what you provide. How do you really help drive your business forward based off of those insights? So to jump in, we're going to start with the early stage. Just by a raise of hands, who feels like in the audience that you have not started your journey of like really maximizing the data? I'm guessing if you're here at Elevar Summit, maybe there aren't a lot of early stages, but okay, we're seeing some. Okay, great. This is a great first step to be at a conference that's focused on data and how it can drive your marketing. So we're going to start there so that we can take you on this full journey with us. So first off, Chris, I wanted to tee it up to you. When you think about, where would you recommend brands start when they're thinking about, how do I jump into this world of the data that I have and actually have it enable my business and where it's going to go?
Yeah, I think data and analytics is really something that's brick by brick, and you have to go build the foundation correctly. And you have to make, like, the philosophy that we've really taken is, how do we make the easy stuff easy and the hard stuff possible, right? And how do you make that easy stuff really repeatable and so that everybody in the business can agree? And it takes a really long time to do that. But our philosophy, which, everybody works differently depending on what kind of organization you're building, but has always been like, we're going to sort of not use a lot of kind of built-in reporting tools from a lot of different systems, and instead focus on how do we get data into a central reporting tool, into a general purpose business intelligence tool, and then join it all together, make sure that it's fresh within 24 hours, and then start building regular metrics that everybody on the business can look at and agree that this is the same number, right? I think a lot of us have spent a lot of time like looking at one number, and marketing thinks it's one thing and merchandising thinks it's another, and the analytics team is saying no, and finance disagrees, right? And that actually can go on for like years. So making that investment to actually say, okay, great, we're going to land this stuff and document it. And like, this is the number. There's only one way to do it. And if you're not doing it that way, like we're talking about totally different things, is an investment that can take a long time, but really does pay off, especially when you're onboarding new employees, you're bringing new people into the business, and there's just one categorical way of doing it, and everyone's looking at the same tool. So I think that that's like the place to start. And like, what's last week's revenue, right? And it's like, is it the number of orders? Is it orders shipped? Is it a formal GAAP revenue recognition, right? Like, what about returns? What about, so like, get those numbers to all agree and start there. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a great litmus test of just ask your team, what is our gross revenue number and how did you get to it? And if everyone's saying the same thing, which I think is very rare that happens, if you haven't done this exercise. Yeah, the exercise Chris is talking about is basically what solves that problem. So if you are asking your team about any metric and they're all coming up with different answers about where it's coming from and how they calculated it, that's a great signal that his exercise can help you get there. Any other thoughts, Brendan, anything that worked for your group as you were empowering data?
Yeah, I think the one thing for us early on was we really focused on choosing the right partners in general. So we've been using Elevar for a long time and a number of other providers here. And what I think a lot of brands don't do early on is really maximize using everything that a provider builds for you, essentially. So like, we've never been like a tech first D2C company where we're going to hire an engineering team and go build custom solutions and go, build something that we think we can, but we don't know if we can get to it or not. We've always been choose the right provider, really push them, and really fully utilize the solution that you're paying for. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that's locked up inside of these SaaS providers or even inside of agencies that, you got to make sure you're using 100% of it rather than only 50% of the solution, because all that stuff was built for a reason. But brands don't always get to that for many years. So it is a build on that, but you got to really fully utilize the solutions that you're paying for.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you don't have to just look to your own team, that there's this great industry and ecosystem that we're in. There are people who specialize, like Elevar has a team of product managers and engineers who are thinking about data and tracking so that your team doesn't have to get that level of expertise. But it's important that somebody in your team is extracting and pulling that through. That's a great point. What would you say as you were, first, I would love to hear, when do you feel like you started your data activation journey with your brands? And what would you say is the biggest learning curve? Because both of your brands are really leaning into, you're quite mature when it comes to data activation. But when you think back to the early days, what was some of the most painful parts, and what would you share to the groups who are just getting started so that they don't have to go through quite as much pain as you did?
Well, I think you kind of have to make a decision of whether you want like everybody to be able to self-service data and you want to sort of like empower everybody to go sort of figure things out on their own, or whether you're going to have like somebody who's an expert who's going to serve the rest of the organization. And that kind of can determine like how you're going to invest and what kind of reporting and solutions you're going to go create. So for us, we like felt very early on that there was a bottleneck. So we're a data first culture, right? So like culturally, if you show up and you're like in a meeting, you're like, we should do this, and you don't have the data to back it up, people are like, well, who is this person? What are they talking about, right? Not every company's like that, right? A lot of times, like it starts from, it can start from a customer insight or it can start from an anecdote. Our company doesn't operate as much that way. You really have to show up with the data. And so it was really important to us to make sure that everybody can access things. So the very first investments that we made were really around like, how do we get business users feeling like they can like get the data that they need to show up prepared to have these conversations? And we knew that we needed to start there.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to like 6 years. I'm looking at Brad over here. I was thinking back to like 6 years ago. I think Brad taught me about what a data layer was on the website. We had the Shopify one at the time, and it was like starting to think about the foundation of what we could be setting in order to make sure that we had better data in the future with it. So that was kind of what started the journey of the underlying data that is created all the time on the website as you get sessions coming in. How do you root yourself in like reality of, okay, we got to make sure this is right. And so it's like the basics, like kind of getting back to that of the foundation of the data, knowing that's going to impact it for years down the line with it. So that's when I first started getting curious around kind of setting that and enabling the data there. And it kind of morphed into an iterative approach of, all right, well, now what does that mean for GA? What does that mean for the subsequent systems that are all connected? Are we choosing the right providers that talk to each other actually rather than being siloed? So it was always like the connectedness of data and that which enabled the organization.
Yeah, I think building on that for a second, like I think it's really easy to come to an event like this if you're like earlier on and go like, oh crap, like I'm like not doing any of the fancy stuff that the people are doing with all the things, right? And it's like I think that's actually really dangerous too. Like throughout our last 10 years, like we've bought a lot of like MarTech solutions and analytics software that like we were out over our skis on, right? And we're like, this is going to be awesome. We'll like have personalization and real time this on the site and, whatever. And it's like, like really what we needed to do was like basic segmentation, or just like we're showing the wrong product, or like better pricing, right? Like, let's go do those things and nail the basics. So I think also you can't get wrapped around the axle and like think like, oh, if only we could, do this really fancy thing, right? That's almost never the answer. That's an optimization at scale, not the thing that like brings you to the next level as a business.
With both of those examples, a lot of when we think about data starts with the digital component, sessions, orders, what can we track on our websites? But there is this component of there's information happening about our companies that is digital, or it's digitally native, but it's things like people calling in, people texting in, people emailing. And that can often feel daunting at the very beginning because it's open form. It's not clean. It's not, standardized. There was a note in one of the earlier sessions about standardizing the data, and that makes your job a lot easier for activating it. But Beck, what would you say for the brands that you work with and that come to you and they really want to start leaning into the value of the information coming in when they're picking up the phone to talk to their brand, or they're messaging in? How do you help them on that journey to get the basics and the foundation in place?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people have come to us and they only want to focus on email or SMS or other non-voice channels. And something that we really try to lean in towards is non-voice. I mean, we regularly perform analyses and experiments to compare the two. And your non-voice regularly outperforms voice. Generally, when we have customers come to us via the voice channels, their customer satisfaction ratings are higher. They generally tend to be more loyal to the brands that we represent. And I mean, this is for a number of reasons. I mean, it's easier to create a personalized journey via the voice channel, which is extremely important. I mean, a lot of customers have made it very clear that they're going to leave a brand if their customer experience is not personalized. Another thing is, people want immediate responses, which is obviously a lot easier to do via the voice channel. You can really reduce your average speed of answer, reduce your average handle time via voice, which again is extremely important. Some other data that we really follow is conversion rates, and we often see much better conversion rates via voice. We have a client, for example, who has a voice campaign. It's not even a sales campaign. It's just regular run-of-the-mill customer support campaign, and the agents are encouraged to do cross-sells and upsells. And every week, these agents generate 2 to 3 times more in sales than what we bill the client. And that's just, we don't see that level of performance on a consistent basis from non-voice as we do with the voice channel.
That's really interesting to think about the voice channel, like being on the phone. If you compare it to conversion rates on site, I'm guessing the numbers for most brands are significantly higher touch, higher, logistics to figure out how to support that. But not only is it delivering on a great customer experience, but it also translates into growth and revenue for the brand. That's really interesting. When on this topic, what are you seeing with the brands you work with? How are they turning those insights and trends that they're seeing in the CS tickets into, these are the changes we want to make on our website. This is what we should do differently with our product line. And I'd love to hear if you guys have examples of across the board. I would love to hear how that has driven sort of where the roadmap for where the business is going.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely encourage our clients to use the data that we gather and to implement it and leverage those insights, not just to improve the overall customer support process, but to make improvements to every aspect of their business. For example, you mentioned the website. You can gather customer feedback and use that to update your FAQs or just improve the overall flow of the website. Advertising, obviously extremely important. You can gather common customer sentiments and use that to guide the tone and content of your ad copy so as to resonate with your target audience as best as possible. You can also take some data and use that to for product improvements, enhance features on your products or add new features to your products. So as long as you have a systematic process for gathering and organizing data, you can really use that to enhance every touch point along the customer journey.
To us, everything's a feedback loop. So we do phone calls. We have like makeup artists on call, basically. So for beauty, right, we have someone that's going to pick up the phone and say, hey, your eyes are this color. Let's talk through it. What's your skin tone? And we're going to give a recommendation based on that. So it's really critical for us to have that channel. We also know the audience and the customer that we're talking to, and oftentimes they want to be on the phone versus chatting in and going back and forth with that, even though many of them are willing to share photos to be able to get matched the right way. But in our world, we want to meet them where they're at. And we're competing with the Ultas and the Sephoras of the world where you can go test it and you can do shave matches. So, and being online only, that's something that's a hurdle that we face. I think for us, it's always been the feedback loop of anything that's coming into the business that's qualitative. There's a reason that we're collecting that, and there's a reason that we need to do something with that. So examples are like post-purchase surveys. That should go into CRO testing on the website to say, how do we get that qualitative data in to be able to make it so we have better decisions there? Or Yachtpo reviews. For years, we've been asking custom questions after getting a review there to say, what are your skin concerns and what's going on here? And so all that data goes into our product development process to say, well, maybe we need to be developing a blush first rather than, another pen over here and whatnot. So we try to look at it like feedback loops, and then we try to like send that data across the organization to make sure that we're informed in the decisions that we're making rather than working within a silo.
I love that example because it's not just about standing up a way that they can talk to your team, but it's also about empowering your team to be able to answer the questions effectively. And it sounds like the feedback loop was one of the key ways you get there. Like, let's listen to what's coming in, let's adapt to what we're showing on the site. And I also love the thought of this can be a competitive advantage. It's a very competitive market for so many industries. Lean into what others aren't doing that you can do really well.
And we were early to the Facebook ads. So 2016 is when we really took off with Facebook ads, and we started responding back to everything, ad comments, and we engaged like it was a support ticket, even though it was public ad comments. And so we really thought and still think that helps drive the algorithm towards showing that more to more people and potential customers that are alike to those people on Facebook.
That's incredible. So now Chris, did you have a thought there or?
Yeah, I think getting folks from the support organization in the room where you're looking at like the business performance, looking at the data and the trends. I think we've had some really interesting experiences where we've launched a new experience on the site or a new way of doing promotions or a new way of merchandising, and we see a metric perform in the way that we want. But then we're getting feedback that like, hey, this isn't working from customer service, right? And you start to see that diverge because you can measure like something that's a short-term kind of like on-site behavior, right? But then like if people actually aren't liking it, like you're going to pick up that signal much faster through the qualitative, right? Rather than like seeing this long-term trend of the business, you're like, oh my God, like performance is changing, what's going on, right? So getting those folks in the room and actually looking like in the long run, those anecdotes tend to be true, right? And you've messed up something about how you're measured or you haven't captured subtlety. So I think bringing those people together in the same room during like a weekly business review or whatever is a great tool for catching those kinds of errors.
That's a great call. In this world of remote, I feel like there's a tendency to like lean out of meetings and lean out of like, let's be in the same conversation and,
we work in different companies.
Yeah. So I think that's great, though, to get people in the same space, whether it's virtual or in person, to say, let's actually talk this through. Let's not each read the insights on our own and come up with our own assessments of where the opportunities are, but let's create a space where together we're looking at this and synergizing on what it means. That's a great example. Okay, so now let's shift into the future. Where is data going and how do we activate data? There's a lot changing in the data landscape. That's been talked about a lot the past few days. So let's jump into when you think about where your team should focus to strengthen their data activation muscles even more. So this is for the brands who you're in the data game, you feel like it's organized, you feel like that there's standards, but the landscape is changing really rapidly. How do you stay ahead of the curve or with the curve instead of behind it? So Chris, anything that you and your teams are focusing on when you think about making sure you're not lagging when it comes to data activation?
Yeah, I think so. We're maybe different than a lot of companies here. So we have a decent sized engineering team and sort of analytics team, and so we have like the ability to do a bunch of stuff ourselves, which is sort of a blessing and a curse. And so we've had to be really deliberate to say like, okay, the way that we're going to approach this, right? Like in particular, it's very easy to imagine how customer service data is suddenly like searchable and summarizable and usable in a structured way, right? With like the ability to transcribe and find insights and sort of current AI tech. And it's actually pretty easy to build that stuff. We have to like really resist to doing it ourselves, even though we could. And because that's just like not the business we're in. And our belief is that that's something that like our third-party solution providers are going to start releasing, and we're starting to see this, right? So I think like our house view is that incumbent players will release good AI-based functionality. Like that's kind of like our view. There's a bunch of, AI-first customer service startups, right? Maybe they'll be the next big thing. I don't know. But our bet is on the Gorgeous and Zendesks of the world, like integrating that stuff well, right? Our bet is on, Algolia and Constructor, like continuing to do a really good job with personalization. And so I think picking partners really well and then understanding what's coming on the roadmap and making sure, I think your first one is a great one, that you can actually take advantage of that and that like they know who you are and that you have access to that stuff first, right? And you're like in the pre-release beta and all that stuff. And that's kind of been our house view of how we're approaching this and not get like overly distracted by some of the opportunities because we think it'll come in the third parties and just want to pick our partners carefully there.
Right. Anything that you're focusing on, Brendan, with your teams when it comes to staying ahead of the curve when it comes to data activation?
I mean, I think the partner one is great. So it's like we really push all of our partners from a roadmap perspective. So like we believe the best partnerships are the ones that we can give the most honest and real feedback, and they listen and then they come back and say, this is what we're working on, this is what's happening, and those partnerships end up being the strongest ones that we have. I think the other thing is the muscle of AI. I believe the same thing of like how it's going to be built into the solutions for the most part, and that's where the engineering teams are. But the teams don't always have the muscles in order to use that necessarily, right? It's like, okay, how do we build this prompt to ask our fairing post-purchase like survey answers of what are these customers doing right now, or like what's the weekly report of changes on that? The teams don't necessarily have that like mentality around how do we build that question in the right way to get some actionable insights. And so we've been working internally just to say like, how do we either prompt things the right way, or how do we ask the right questions up front to get the data kind of extracted out and be actionable? So that's been just it just like feels like it's building a muscle for us to do.
These are great points. And Beck, I'm going to send it over to you for a second, because a lot of what's being talked about is let's partner with and lean on third-party solutions who are building this great technology versus putting the pressure on internal teams. But one theme that I want to just call out here before we jump into your thoughts on that is AI has been like the talk of the town for the past 18 months. And I feel like, especially on the brand side, there's this pressure to, how are you using AI? Are you using it? What are you doing? When are you opening it up? When really you might already be using it through your third parties. Take a look at, there's a company called usertesting.com. At one of their events last summer, they've been doing AI for 7 years, but they haven't really been mentioning that to all of the people who are using their technology. So all of the brands who are using that particular platform actually are AI driven without the pressure of your team feeling it. And Chris, I thought that was a great point you made on, is this our core competency? Are we trying to become the best, most savvy?
We sell soap on the internet.
Yes. We don't need to become the people who figure out how to make reviews really automated and data driven. So Beck, on the flip side of this, are you feeling and hearing that requests coming from the brands you work with of for you and your team to pull that technology, or whether it's AI or just being future-proofing what you're building so that data can be a driving force in your platform?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that AI is the way of the future. Obviously, I think Gene did an awesome job yesterday talking about the future of AI. And while we have implemented some AI features into our processes, we're currently working on focusing on implementing more complex AI features that can really do a deep dive into the data and not just gather more data, but be able to gather data more efficiently. And, we're really working on AI that can work with our voice interactions and beyond just call summarization or keyword detection. AI can listen to all of your voice interactions, whether it be in real time or after the fact, which of course is extremely difficult to do manually. And it can gather all kinds of data. For example, customer sentiments. What frustrates your customers, or how do your customers feel about their returns process? And again, you can just gather so much more data with AI and leverage those insights, like I said earlier, to be able to enhance every touch point along the customer journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. It can enhance every single, whether it's pre-conversion, at conversion, post-conversion. There's so much living in your data that can tell you where to focus and what the unlocks are going to be. But you need to be looking in the platforms that you're already paying for, are already integrated into your systems, already have the data. Okay, so let's get a little bit more like, what are the things that are scary about where we're at with data? So when we think about, we're in a world of, there's lots of variety of data. The volume of data is growing. It was mentioned in an earlier session about, all the tracking changes, and is that fear mongering? Is it not? Leading the brands that you lead, what keeps you up at night when you think about, I have all of this data at my fingertips, but it is wide in terms of, and it's very distributed in terms of where it lives?
I think, one of the things that keeps you up at night is cost. Like, I don't know if that's true. It's sort of a prosaic answer, but it gets quite expensive very fast when you're like, okay, we need to like capture this particular thing and we need to analyze it and look at it. And figuring out how to actually manage cost as companies. I think one of the disadvantages I think that like we as a group have is when we're buying things to like look at, metrics on the website or whatever, they're all priced like per user, right? And if you're selling, enterprise SaaS stuff, right, your like average value per visit is quite high. But if you're selling, home cleaning products, right, the average incremental value, like a single visitor, is pretty low, but you're paying the same like per session price. So actually figuring out like, okay, how do we like get just sort of basic telemetry on a lot of things in a way that, we can do good funnel analysis, we can like get the insights we need, we can store that data in a way that's actually economic, is like sort of a bigger challenge than I sort of would have thought in like the early days. I did a lot of negotiation early days, being like, one day we're going to be this big brand. Don't worry, we're going to be a big account for you guys. Just give us a huge discount now. And 3 years later, I'm like, oh shit, we're paying these guys like $200,000 a year, So it does become a big problem. And we've done a lot of, I think, back to your excellent first point, like vendor consolidation, realizing, okay, we can actually use this to solve this other problem. Let's like shut down that contract, right? Because it's relatively cheap in the early days, but it gets expensive.
Yeah, we've got more tech solutions in the business than we do employees in a lot of ways. So like just managing that complexity, that's internal and that's also running the website. And so what keeps me up at night is the siloed data of that is saying that all needs to be talking to something, right? Is that getting over to Klaviyo to make sure that we're doing the right segmentation, but we're getting some qualitative data that would be useful for the CRM team? I don't know. So like when stuff just sits in one solution and it's not integrated into another one, that keeps me up at night, because it's like we're not doing anything with that, even though it has all the possibility to help us have a better personalized email or SMS or, experience on the website with that.
That's a great call out. I often, when I think about data, I relate it to an iceberg where, the data is the iceberg, and most companies and brands that I've worked with, we're scratching the surface. We're paying attention to the thing that we can see above the water, but there's so much there. But it's about enabling it and connecting it. And until you do that first step, you are stuck with just the little bit that's already naturally connected. Okay, so on that note, how the last kind of final thought we'll talk about on this is how do you structure your team? Like, who are the people? You guys are chiefs of each of your companies, and you have a lot to think about and a lot to do. How do you enable your team to be driving this effort and this work, knowing that it's an ever-changing landscape? It's quite technical, and it's a bit intimidating because there's so much that lives in so many different siloed areas. How are you setting up your teams, and how are you directing your teams to help with this work?
Take that first? All right.
Yeah.
All right. When we were building the company, we were like, each department is going to be the best department, and it's going to be like the best people, and they're going to like, help us figure out what to do next. And the result was we were like, is like marketing leading decision making? Is it product? Is it merchandising? Is it analytics? Right? And so we had this problem where analytics, we had like tasked them with like, figuring out like where we go next and like really driving strategic direction by what, these insights were telling us. And it turned out that wasn't a good model for us. And we sort of retrenched and like deliberately redesigned that organization as like, you are a support function, right? We're hiring incredible people who are like super smart, but like their job is to be able to provide like decision support and insight to support the business, like people who are saying, hey, we're going to go into this new category, right? And that decision is getting made by the buying and inventory merchandising team, right? And then like it's getting supported by the analytics function. And so like changing that approach really helped us a lot. And having, we also experimented with embedding analytics folks and like BI people inside organizations in different parts of the company. Like there was an embedded marketing person. That didn't work either. We're small, right? We have a 5-person analytics team, which probably sounds huge to some people, but like, the scheme of things, like 5 people in analytics, right? I think Wayfair has like 100 in data science, right? So still small. And if you don't have them in one place, like those folks don't have career paths, right? They don't have anybody else to show their cool work to because they're like working with a bunch of marketers, right? So I think we have a single team with people who sort of matrix into different parts of the company, but they like run together and work together and have a career path together and have like but deliberate like business stakeholders that you serve.
Any team structure for Brendan, you and your team that's worked especially well?
We do similar. So we have like horizontal teams and then we have vertical teams in a lot of ways. So like data would be a horizontal team that supports across it. Technology and development would be similar in those ways from a technical perspective. And then I think the only other change that we really talk about often is we talk about our partners as being part of our team essentially. So like I'll say like, Shopify engineers or Thrive Causemetics engineers. And like, so that way it's like, it really hits home that we are relying on you to be part of our internal team in order to help drive business results. So we look at our team as like a greater team beyond just like employees, and into the areas that we're never going to hire into necessarily and go build.
I love that framing of like the third-party teams are an extension of your team. It's not like you're on that side of the fence, we're on this side of the fence. It's we're all in the playground together. Beck, for you, do you have any examples of brands that you're working with that pull you in close, and how does that enable you to drive value for their businesses?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of our brands pull us in close. I mean, like I said, for example, earlier, one of our biggest clients, we just have a basic customer support campaign for them. And it's something that we've worked with them on for a very long time. We've been able to get to the point where we can have these agents generate a ton of sales for these clients. And we try to work with all of our clients on a one-on-one basis and really personalize their experience to be able to enhance their, customer support process and be able to improve every aspect of that customer journey. Like Brendan was saying earlier, you got to work with your partners to be able to improve on that as well.
That's great. So that really ties us up in terms of like where the data activation is going and how to really enable your teams and your business. There's a lot to think about in this space. It's a space of thinking about, if you haven't gotten started, don't worry about these things in terms of team structure and leaning into your third parties to really help them become part of the solution, but instead focus on the basics. What are your metrics? Where are they coming from? Is everyone aligned internally? Then start finding ways to integrate that. Chris made a great point about it's an immersive part of his business. It's not something where only a certain group is coming into the table to the table with data-driven insights. Everyone who's coming up with an idea, the data needs to be there to back it. And then I think the matrixed organization and really looking at third parties as an extension of your team, that's something that Brendan has spoken about, which can be a game changer for businesses where you're lean, you're nimble, you have lots of focus within each of your areas, and it can become siloed unless the leadership is really spending time to structure things in a way that is going to enable the business. So thank you guys so much for sharing today. It's been a great session. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.